The offense described in this video is regarded as one of the most deranged in history. But first, viewer discretion is advised. If you're on the hunt for the most intriguing and mind-blowing crime stories, you have landed on the right channel. Because we feature stories weekly, so if you like that kind of thing, please shatter the like button and slam the subscribe button. And turn on notifications so you don't miss a single riveting story. Bailey Harris was born on December 11, 1998, to a criminal lawyer and a pediatrician. The family lived in San Diego, California, which is among the most beautiful spots in all of America when it comes to weather and places to live. That's why, of the 777 billionaires in the world, 5 live in this one city. In 2012, after Bailey celebrated his 14th birthday, his parents parted ways. Of course, this was highly distressing to him, but more so, he was taken aback by the revelation that each of his parents had found new partners soon afterwards. The turbulence at home gave way to a period of calm, however, as high school beckoned and Bailey excelled on the football field and in the classroom. Bailey was a standout athlete, and by the time he hit his senior year, he had 11 D1 scholarships to choose from. That wasn't a big surprise, given that the 17-year-old weighed over 185 pounds and could throw a pass as well as any quarterback his age. He was so prolific that he often won MVP trophies. But while Bailey was physically intimidating, he wasn't mentally cut out for football long-term. High school was one thing, but he and his coaches knew college football was a huge step up. That's why they would poke him and prod him to get a rise out of him and try to get his blood boiling. But it just didn't work. That was until one day his mentor and coach, Adam Springfield, played a secret trick on him, and it was a dirty, underhanded one. Behind Bailey's back, Adam had conspired with the rest of the team to plan a premeditated attack on Bailey, their MVP and star. The ruse involved letting the opposing team at the next game attack Bailey head-on, without providing him protection as the quarterback. Obviously, the scheme was full of peril for Bailey, who had no clue what was coming. Head injuries are notoriously dangerous in football and occur all too often, even when all your teammates are working with you. To have them conspire against him meant Bailey was at risk of serious injury, and that's exactly what happened. As Bailey took to the field, he simply had no idea that he wasn't taking on another team with his own, but he was running onto the football pitch where every player was his enemy. As the first serious play got underway, the coach's plan played out to a T, and Bailey, unprotected by his supposed teammates, got crushed by a 220-pound linebacker who collided with him in a head-on collision. This bizarre and totally unethical plan by Coach Adam was intended to rile up Bailey to get more aggressive, not just for this match, but every other match. In the coach's mind, Bailey would never know that his teammates left a gap open on purpose to crush him. But the consequences of that head-on collision in 2015 had a knock-on effect that nobody could have predicted. What started out as a plan to get Bailey's blood to boil ended up twisting his neural pathways when his skull was effectively bulldozed by his much larger opposition. And that in turn had a radical effect on Bailey's personality. Gone was the gentle giant, and in its place a bizarre, unrecognizable character was born. Soon after the match, after a brief recovery from a suspected concussion, Bailey's temper would begin to flare for the smallest of reasons. When his sister misplaced his belongings one day, he snapped at her. And when his friends poked fun at him like classmates do, Bailey no longer would be jovial back but would lash out verbally. And yet, that was just the beginning of an unbelievable and shocking sequence of events that nobody could have predicted. On the evening of January 14, 2016, Bailey arrived home from practice to find that his mother and sister were laid out on the living room floor with blood coagulating by their sides, drifting towards a carpet. Terrified by what he saw, Bailey called 911 to report the horrendous scene where a knife was cast aside next to his mother, and stab wounds were clearly evident on his sister's corpse. As the police arrived, they were horrified by what they saw. The living room looked like a scene out of a Freddy Krueger movie, with Bailey's mother's body face down and a red stain on the back of her white blouse, still damp. His sister lay motionless where she fell, and it was clear she had attempted to defend herself valiantly by the cut marks on her hands. The lead detective, John Ames, sat Bailey down in an attempt to console him as tears flowed down his cheeks, seeing his mother and sister's lifeless bodies in front of him. The questions followed. Who might have had an axe to grind against his mother and sister? Did either of them have enemies? Was his father to blame? Did his sister have a jealous boyfriend? What could possibly have triggered such a heinous crime? It seemed the person committing the act was full of rage and emotion, A revenge killing perhaps? But why? As Detective Ames interviewed the prime suspects and confirmed their alibis, it dawned on him that the one person who he had not suspected at all was the same person who dialed 911, Bailey. Initially, he took it at face value that Bailey had been at football practice when the murders occurred. But when he looked a little deeper into Bailey's movements for the day, he discovered that between 3:45 p.m. when school ended and 4:30 p.m. when football practice started, Bailey had a window of time just long enough to get home and commit the unspeakable act of murdering his mother and sister. Yet, just because he had the opportunity didn't mean he actually did it. Detective Ames wanted to sweep his suspicion under the rug, but a little voice just kept nagging at him. And so he canvassed the neighborhood asking for video footage from ring cameras recording street activity. No neighbors had seen Bailey come and go, but when Detective Ames rang the doorbell of the Garcia family, whose house faced Bailey's, they didn't hesitate to provide the recording of that key time window. And what that video footage would reveal would shock the detective. At 3:57 p.m., Bailey arrives home in his Toyota Camry, a sweet 16 gift he received from his mom. By 4:11 p.m., he ran out of the house and jumped into the car again, accelerating out of his driveway and down the street in the direction of school and his football practice. What happened in those 14 minutes would leave family members, detectives, and Bailey himself in utter shock. It turns out that during that narrow window, Bailey entered a phase of psychosis where he literally lost his mind. All it took was one request by his mom to spark an upsurge of anger that led to rage, and ultimately a psychotic episode where, in a frenzy, Bailey picked up a knife and lunged at his mother, who clearly was taken by complete surprise and stood no hope for defending herself from her athletic quarterback son. Still in a mad fury, Bailey then turned his ire towards his sister, who had seen the horrific act he had committed against his mother and put her hands up to defend herself, but was simply unable to escape his violence. When Detective Ames received the results of the DNA test on the knife, 3 samples were found: Bailey's mom, sister, and Bailey himself. In his trial, Bailey's defense lawyer claimed insanity. The teenager had simply lost his mind following a brain injury on the field that had completely altered the star quarterback's personality forevermore. The prosecution argued that Bailey was a threat to society. If he could do such an unspeakable thing to his family, the general public were surely at risk of his rage surfacing again in the future. The jury agreed, and Bailey was convicted of first-degree murder of his mother and sister. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole at the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. To this day, Bailey's coach Adam nor his teammates have been prosecuted for their conspiracy. So that's going to wrap up today's story, but if you haven't already, tell us what you think of Bailey's sentence and his coach's devious plan. How would you react? And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, to smash the like button and subscribe for more riveting crime stories.